I don't know why. I don't know why he's here. He's been thrown off rules. There's a lot of people like that idea, Jay. I don't. I got a new guy that he put it out by mistake. Good morning, uh, members of the Senate. How's my rules chairman? Does anybody know? Okay. He's still real ugly, right? Y'all, all you gotta do is look at him and you can pick that up real quick. All right, y'all bow with me. Gracious Heavenly Father, for another day in your kingdom, we're eternally grateful. Thank you for all you do for us. Thank you for forgiving us. Keep your mercy on us. Lead us and guide us. Be with Mr. Mullis. Let things check out okay on him this morning. Keep your hand on us. Forgive us when we do wrong. I ask these things in the name of the Prince of Peace. Amen. Okay, here's the deal. Really quick. Mr. Jaspers is up next, but his bill is not on the yellow sheet. But I thought it would be appropriate for him to tell us what 1414 is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Here to ask you for House Resolution 1414. This is going to be it's going to create a study committee on us looking at school safety across the state of Georgia in relationship to what's happened in Florida and the outcry from, I know, everyone in this room's constituents asking us to look for it. It's pretty simple, 9 folks, 5 meetings across the state, be opened out very broadly. Thank you, sir.
Watch this. There are no questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spencer, you're a regular visitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My second ask is H.R. 1198 on page 1 under modified open. That is to ask the federal government to keep the rate of per diem rate for the nursing home care for veteran homes at 75%. And that's that one. It works in tandem with H.R. 888 on the back of your page, page 2, modified structured rule. One more plug for H.R. 1107. Let's go into space. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No questions. Y'all gonna have to bear with us. I don't know how to do this machine. Mr. Brockway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your first page on the modified open, the third one from the bottom, Senate Bill 139 would authorize the technical college system and the State Board of Education to work together to develop I'm sorry, my mind is all jumbled up, sorry. Certifications that would be sent out to high schools so that students can earn certifications in various industries like welding or computers. So it was House Bill 963 that got to rules too late, and we added it to the Senate bill. So if there are any questions, Mr. Speaker, I'll be happy to, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer them.
I don't want to be the speaker. Any questions? No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Did y'all notice Mr. Brockway said his mind was all muddled up? Did you not see the wall? That's muddled up minds. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, let's see, we're on Senate Bill 395 on modified open rule. This creates a Georgia Joint Defense Commission that will make recommendations, develop methods, serve as a task force, and implement a plan. And this is, I presented this earlier, went back and got an amendment or an adjustment, and there will be a favorable substitute coming for this that will be well received, that will work out more details on this. Ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions, Mr. Watson? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Huffstetler. Y'all know Mr. Huffstetler's my senator, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Y'all know Mr. Huffstetler sometimes treats me like a yard dog. Mr. Huffstetler.
And first, I want to say that Representative Coomer had a bill the other day asked about, and it was passed out that day from the full committee.
He had to ask, how many of y'all are over there?
Well, we have
56? He asked 52 and reminded them of it when they got in that well. Heck, fire, I had to get him to shut up.
And it was passed out so fast, even the reporter missed it in the meeting. So, and Representative Earhart had a bill that was on the committee. There were some questions. It's back on today. Those were the two things that were asked for. And I do want to say that we have passed out 23 finance bills of the bills that Chairman Powell has sent over, and have 6 more today. Now, I've got 3 issues on the agenda. One is the yellow sheet, SR 195. I believe it's still on the yellow. That is a resolution from last year supported by Senator David Perdue that would call for a constitutional convention to look at term limits for federal full-time legislatures, and I would appreciate your consideration of that.
Yeah, they came to see me yesterday, so I'm looking at it.
Okay. And then on page 3, I've got 2 bills back to back there. Senate Bill 355 is sunsetting Senate Bill 31 that was passed in 2009 as far as nuclear construction, and it has no effect on current construction. This would only be on plants built in the future that they would have to come back to the legislature and look at the financing method again. My original bill did have some opposition from Georgia Power and the Georgia Chamber. They both have no opposition to this bill. It's a compromise that's been reached. The last one, Senate Bill 364. This is the Jobs for Moms bill. We've got some PAs that want to work part-time, and due to the sponsorship regulations, they can't share jobs and have enough supervision coverage from the anesthesiologist. This does not affect supervision. The supervision will stay 1 to 4, but the sponsorship, they could have others they sponsor that are working on different weeks, and so the sponsorship goes up to 1 to 8, but again, the supervision stays exactly the same in the hospital.
Any questions of Mr. Huffstetler? Thank you. Mr. Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back before you today under page 3, Structured Rule 328, Senate Bill. As mentioned previously, this removes 3 out-of-date and not used exemptions, as well as fixes that important part of the federal and state tax code to protect our businesses in Georgia who are doing work internationally.
No questions.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Tippins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have 2 education bills for your consideration this morning. On page 2, the 5th one down, is Senate Bill 362. This bill provides for an innovative assessment pilot which will take a look at doing a better job of testing. This flexibility has been granted through the revision of the ESSA bill of 2015, and we're looking to go to academic assessments that are more real-time and also can be much more instructive. The second bill, Senate Bill 401, the 11th down on page 2, about middle of the page. This changes somewhat and looks at the role of our high school counselors to look at the current aptitude assessments that are available in the state of Georgia to high school students. That is an evaluation of career aptitudes, and these aptitudes, how they tie to the opportunities in the job market. I want to be clear, this is not a tracking bill. This is an informative tool by which the student and their parents can make more informed decisions as to the placement these students may seek either in college or career training. I urge your favorable consideration of these.
Any questions, Mr. Tippins? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you kind of looked like a House member. I should have put you up to the front.
I wonder why you didn't.
Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be back home again over here. I have 3 bills for
They
your
probably
consideration.
they won't let anything else out of yours in the Senate. I promise you can get on that list and you stay on it. I'm on it for 4 years now. So we're,
First one's under modified open rule on the second page, Senate Bill 377. This just codifies our workforce development board and puts it under our technical college system. The second one, actually the next two under modified structured rule on page 3, Senate Bill 406 towards the bottom there. This requires national fingerprint background checks for those working with our elderly and long-term care facilities. And the last one is Senate Bill 436, next one there. And this is just a cleanup from our probate court judges council, something they recommended.
no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I have 3 bills. The first bill is under modified open rule. At the bottom of the page, on page 1, Senate Bill 330, which codifies the 3 components of the agriculture education program and also creates a pilot program for agriculture education in elementary schools. The second bill is also under modified open rule on page 2, about the third way down the page, Senate Bill 370. This bill would waive the first $25,000 of an estate for Medicaid recipients. At the current time, I had this brought to me by a constituent whose mother had an estate that was worth about $30,000, and she had a friend whose parent passed away about the same time, whose estate was worth $23,000. Well, the person whose estate was worth less than $25,000, the state does not claim that money, so they kept $23,000. And since her mother's estate was worth a little bit over $30,000, they took all of it. So this seems to be an inequity, and if this bill passed, it would waive the first $25,000 for everyone. And then finally, the last bill on page 3 under structured rule, Senate Bill 458, which deals with reduced penalties for CUVA when the land is in a LLC or a partnership.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a privilege to stand on the Senate floor with you the other day as we cleared up a fracking mess we had over there. Please don't misquote me on that, anyone, if the press is here.
Well,
Mr. Chair.
I got real popular with that bill over there. Oh, yeah.
Okay, under modified structure rule on page 3, and we're dealing with 3s over here in this chamber, so let's deal with Senate Bill 367. This deals with indemnification. This changes the law. If a first responder was killed in the line of duty and they were unmarried with no dependents, then the family or their estate could not receive the indemnification. So we simply are fixing that now, that if a first responder is killed in the line of duty, the indemnification, $150,000 that comes from the state, will go to that first responder's family or their estate. Senate Bill 369, revenues collected from fines. This It's changing. When we had the criminal justice reform, we created these mental health courts, family courts, and so forth. There was a $5 fee that used to be collected that got missed, and so we're restoring that. That's cost POAB about $4 million a year. This passed through committee unanimously, so I hope we get that on. And since we're dealing in threes, Mr. Chair, 368 didn't make it here. It passed out of committee on Monday. Can I go ahead and mention that one while I'm here?
Oh, please.
Okay, that just deals with CJCC, and Chairman Powell's here, and he can tell you that we had the perfect bill. He actually assigned 3 of his committee members to help me perfect that bill, and we did that, and it passed unanimously out of his committee on Monday.
You know, Mr. Powell has 75% of the bills that we've got has come from him. Wrong, Powell. I'm gonna talk about you anyway, Jay. You ain't supposed to be here. No, when we say Powell, between the two of them, I think we've got 3% of our bills come from the rest of our members. I do have a question.
This is the public safety Powell, Mr. Chair, just to be clear.
A Powell. I have a Powell, a J Powell. Go to 367.
Yes, sir.
Right now, is there an indemnification if they have a will or an assigned beneficiary?
If they are a first responder, they are not married with no dependents, the indemnification does not apply, regardless if they have a will or whatever. This allows it to go whether they have a will or not. It structures where it goes.
If they are married, the indemnification is $150,000.
That's correct. We raised it from $100,000 in the Back to Badge legislation last year to $150,000, and that's correct. It's $150,000.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wait a second. I guess you do have a question too, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, on the same bill that our chairman asked you about, Senate Bill 367, the current $150,000 that is paid to the deceased person in this situation, is that come out of the general fund of the state, or is that some kind of insurance policy we have?
It's not an insurance policy. I really don't recall. I didn't bring my chart, my folder with me for this bill, so I can get you that information exactly where it comes from. But I think it comes from fines that it funds that. But I'm not 100% sure, Representative Fleming. I know it was running very low last year. Even though we increased it to $150,000, the fund did have some difficulties, but I think it's more healthy this year than it was last year.
And that leads to my question. I was going to ask, if this is money that does come out of the state's general fund, was there a fiscal note attached to it? Do we have an idea of how many more people we're adding to that?
Well, it's just whoever's killed in the line of duty. I mean, so it's not, there's no way to predict that. I can't tell you how many. We had 9 officers killed in the line of duty a couple of years ago, but I don't know. This year I know we've had a 1 or 2 that's already been killed in the line of duty, but there's no way, there's no one can give you a number of how many it would relate to.
This would be my question for you. If we probably have statistics of maybe at least 20 years going back, you could tell us this is how many lost their lives, this is how many that would now be included that would have previously been excluded. I guess that would be my question.
Well, your real question, I think, Representative Fleming, would be how many did not receive the indemnification.
And that's what I meant.
I don't know.
That's what I meant.
I don't know the answer to that, but I also would say that even if you go back 20 years, that wouldn't be accurate because there seems to be an increase of people, first responders killed in the line of duty, so it would be an obscure number no matter what you did, in my opinion.
It may be the base.
If there is such a base, yes, sir. Yeah.
Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the gentleman on line 28, it says it adds estate administrator in addition to spouse and dependents who may elect to receive payment in a lump sum of $150,000. What's the thinking behind adding a state administrator in there as somebody who can receive a $150,000 payment?
That was requested by DOAS to kind of give the order in which it would go. So that was their request.
From a policy standpoint, I've not studied this bill in committee, so I'm just kind of trying to process this. What's the thinking behind, I guess that's an executor of an estate, or as it says, a state administrator. I'm just trying to understand the underlying policy. Did they speak to you about that at all?
No, they didn't speak to me about why they needed it, but they just asked that it be included to clear up some problems that they may have in distributing the funds if there's a difference, is my understanding.
I mean,
I don't have the bill in front of me, so I kind of feel one hand tied behind my back here, but
I'll see you offline, Senator. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I come to ask for Senate Bill 350, which is under modified open rule on page 2. It's the second bill. Congress amended the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act to only require information practices notices be sent one time as long as the underlying policy of the practices has not changed. This was requested of me by the Independent Insurance Agents of Georgia, and I work with the Insurance Commissioner's Office on this. Georgia law still says that they have to be sent at least every 2 years, every 24 months, and this bill simply aligns Georgia law with the federal law.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring forth to you three retirement bills, all of them on modified open rule. Senate Bill 129, which is one that allows military to buy in for some time. 197 is the bill that requires any buy-in to be at full actuarial cost. And 333 is the bill that was requested by a number of the municipalities in the state. Any questions?
I've got 333 on today's calendar.
Thank you, sir.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Ligon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring again Senate Bill 101, which is on page 1, and this allows the temporary full-time hourly employees to purchase into the employee retirement system. They have to pay the full actuarial value, and as you said the other day, Mr. Chairman, that is very expensive.
Mr. Ligon, the bill that 101 started out to be was a pretty simple 3/4 of a page bill. It is no longer a simple 3/4 of a page bill, and I don't know that I can even find the name natural resources in the bill. What happened?
Well, they opened it up to the other employees, I think, in the House committee.
Yeah.
And it would apply to the members of the natural resources as well.
Can you explain the buyback of 5 years for defined contribution members?
Yes, sir. You have to pay the full actuarial value, and you can pay it in a lump sum, or you're allowed to pay it over time.
And does that move them from the defined contribution plan to the defined benefit plan?
Yes, sir, it does.
Yes, sir, it does. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
my fellow coastal legislator.
Yes.
Have you got any information on Representative Battle's retirement plan, legislative retirement plan?
I have not. I don't have any information on his retirement plan.
We missed, it should have been Mr. Black that you asked your question.
Can we send back for him?
No. No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thompson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On modified open rule, we have Senate Bill 381. It's a surplus lines bill. It's a simple bill, simply that non-admitted carriers are domiciled in the state of Georgia. We want to allow them to be able to offer insurance in our state.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Tate.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We're looking at Senate Bill 457, which is under modified open rule, page 2, third from the end of that section. It is my pleasure today, I've mentioned to you Mr. Niles Francis, who is the reason for the bill. When I heard one of my compadres say a constituent of his, my constituent is here. Mr. Francis, will you please stand?
Ms. Tate, let me run this thing, please.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you knew that he was here. Mr. Francis brought this bill as a result of the active shooter situations that we have. This is a month to the day of the Parkland shooting in Florida. And, excuse me, I brought this bill on his behalf so that they will have school drills, safety drills in schools. And they do them in a lot of districts. Some districts don't do them. Mr. Francis wanted in particular them to be more often. And so that was why he brought the bill to me. The other bill that I am honored to ask you for is Senate Bill 331, which simply allows lottery prize winners to remain anonymous under certain conditions. And that is on, I'm sorry, that is under the modified structured rule, which is on page 3, the third from the top.
Is that Mr. Henson's bill?
Yes, it is.
Is Mr. Henson in the building?
No, he is not.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, wait just 1 second, Ms. Tate. They've changed my board. It's gotten so small I can barely see it. Mr. Setzler.
Senator, what's the reception of this been from the Association of Private Schools? I mean, this bill, in essence, only affects private schools. It makes it now a mandate for private schools to write the same safety plans that public schools do. So it just comes out of, I mean, what's your reception been from the private schools?
We have had no opposition from the public or private schools. As I said, they, by and large, are all doing it as already, and so there has been no, they have not had any comments negatively regarding the piece of legislation.
Now, the current statute says school safety plans for private schools may be prepared with them. Does it not give us pause that we're making a command on private schools for something? I mean, we typically manage that with a less heavy hand. It just gives me pause, Senator.
I understand where you're coming from. Like I said, there has been no opposition from them, and I think the majority of them, based on what I'm hearing, already have and do this, so it's not going to cause any great pause from them.
And to your point, I know they have safety plans. They're already doing it. I don't know why, if it's something that's being done commonly, we've got to create a legislative command to do that when it's in terms of our legislative reach. We do a lot of things with public schools, but mandates on private schools, particularly for things they're doing, it just gives me pause, Senator.
I understand where you're coming from, and the whole idea of it is to make sure that our children in public and private schools are safe and know what to do in the event that there is a situation. We just want to make sure that they know how to handle it. So it's for the safety of our children.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Tate, now find your fellow Mr. Francis right over here. No, I want him to stand right there beside you. This is Mr. Francis, who she wants to bill for. Thank you for coming, Mr. Francis. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committees. I respectfully request two bills this morning. The first bill is on page 1, modified open rule. It's Senate Bill 82. It provides that members of the Georgia National Guard and reservists meets residential requirements for HOPE scholarship and HOPE grants. My dear friend, Representative Shaw Blackman, he really likes the language and really would like to see this bill passed. The second bill is Senate Bill 349. That's page 2, top of the page. It provides a valid Veterans Health Identification Card must be included as satisfactory evidence of identification for those notaries performing their acts.
Mr. Blackman, that just thrills you that we can get something of yours through here? I know I treat him like my son, but y'all don't need to be treating him like my son, because you treat him badly sometime. Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
This is, in case y'all want to know, this is Mr. Stone.
Thank you. Committee members, I'm here to introduce you to one resolution on page 2. It's second from the bottom under modified open rule. This resolution would create a joint study committee on adoption expenses. In working closely with Representative Reeves on HB 159, we determined that there are no guidelines for what constitutes reasonable expenses and no procedures for approval. In situation with expenses in adoption, attorneys walk a fine line between what's legal and what's unlawful inducements. What this study committee would do would be to help provide guidance and procedures for approval of living expenses. Be happy to answer any questions on SR 774. Hearing none, under modified structure rule, the last bill on page 2 is SB 194. This is a garnishment cleanup bill. Chairman Willard and I, 3 years ago, worked on comprehensive garnishment reform. We've heard from the practicing community as to how it's worked out in actual practice, and we've identified areas that needed clarification or improvement. I'll be happy to go into any of those.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I hope y'all have a great day.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you on the second page, modified open rules, Senate Bill 353. This is a bill that's coming from the insurance commissioner that requests where we can fine up to $5,000 fine for boilers and pressure vessels. I know that here in the last week or so, y'all had a family that was recognized in the house where a deputy lost his life in the line of duty in Richmond County. That deputy had served over 30 years, and this is where this comes from, that the insurance commissioner found out he could not find boilers and pressure vessels like he can elevators and escalators, for example.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have a wonderful day.
Y'all have to remember that Mr. Anderson was the beneficiary of my wrath. First time he took the wrath for the Senate, and was very nice about it. course, it couldn't be any other way, you know. Mr. Tillery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On third page, second from the top, Senate Bill 321 updates our Medicaid fraud statute to make it compliant with federal Medicaid fraud statute.
Any questions? No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I could also bring up, there's another bill that's not listed, Senate Bill 431. It's a bill that the language passed the House as well. It passed the Senate with 4 no votes, but those 4 no votes are strategically placed on one committee, and that the House version was assigned to that committee, so I need help from my colleagues across the hall if we're going to get that through.
Well, it is on there. If you'll ask for it, I'll put it on tomorrow.
I appreciate you considering Senate Bill 431. I did not see it. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you want to tell us what 431?
Yes, sir. The Recreational Properties Act, there was a Supreme Court case that came down that was, it interpreted our words exactly how we meant our words to be interpreted. Well, it interpreted our words as they read, but not what I think we meant by it. There was a 6-year-old in Garden City that got into a football game for free. The Recreational Property Act reads that if you get into a recreational facility for free, that no liability can be, that immunity, the person who owns the property has immunity, no liability can be passed on to the property owner. Her parents paid to get in, she did not pay, and the Supreme Court interpreted that to say that the 6-year-old could not recover any damages, even though her parents and everyone else had paid to be there that day.
It is on page 2 if you're looking for it. That's the premise liability section.
You're right. 431. I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hawkins, you got a question?
Back to SB 321. I've heard from providers over many years that if their staff puts down a wrong number, miscode something, it's considered as Medicaid fraud until it's cleared up. Does your bill address that in any way?
No, sir. All it addresses is that the federal rule requires that we have 4 things in place in order for, if we do have recoveries in Medicaid fraud, they're split up the way that the monies were sent to the state. So right now, it's basically 2/3 to the feds, 1/3 to the state.
Based on FMAP.
Correct. And what 321 allows is if we pass this statute, we can get a 10% enhancement on recoveries from Medicaid fraud. That's all it does.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clear it up for me again. This bill passed 431, passed the House almost unanimously, and why isn't it good enough for the Senate?
I think it's very good for the Senate, Mr. Earhart. That's why I agreed to carry almost identical language there. However, there were 4 no votes in the Senate, and those 4 no votes are on the committee to which this bill was assigned in the Senate.
So the committee killed it?
I don't know if the committee killed it. I just know those 4 no votes happen to be on one committee.
Well, maybe they need to reconsider that, don't you think, Senator?
It hasn't been called up.
Which committee was it?
I think it got assigned to Ag.
That was the Ag chairman. Maybe he'll come by and we can get some information from him over the next few days.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Before we just drop our interest in the House bill.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Earhart, if you want to further your discussion, I would suggest we do it in here this morning. If you
on that particular bill, Mr. Chairman?
Beg your pardon?
On that particular legislative bill?
Yeah. Do we need to have some more?
If you think it's all right, Mr. Chairman, I have an issue with, and always have, with House propositions that seem to miraculously, like zombies, come back to life when a senator brings them over here. I appreciate your interest in it.
Yes, sir.
I'm not casting down aspersions. I think it was a good proposition when it left the House. Now it's come back to life.
Is it a good proposition in your opinion? with what's come back from them? Is it our bill? Do like this or like that?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I missed your question.
I said, is it our bill, House bill?
There are only two words different, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rhett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow colleagues, friends, and y'all. Today I come to talk with you about Senate Bill 358. It's on the modified open rule near the top, 358. Basically, this legislation would allow government to apply to Department of Community Affairs to create a banking improvement zone that covers regions with limited access to financial institutions. I worked together with Commissioner of Banking and Finance, Mr. Kevin Hagler, and Oscar Fears, who's the Deputy Bank Commissioner for Legal Affairs, and we crafted this bill together, and Mr. Fears came and testified to the noteworthiness of the bill in the House committee meeting, and if you all would give it your favorable consideration, we would appreciate it.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. It's the last bill under, I believe, modified open rule, Senate Resolution 821. This will create technology IT corridors in Savannah and Augusta. And those two areas were chosen during a study committee over the off session. They have the infrastructure necessary for them to be successful and the leadership on the ground to be able to market these areas to prospective businesses to help them grow.
Are there any other corridors?
In this bill, we have just these two. I do understand there's another corridor in Georgia somewhere that has not been terribly successful. I don't believe it has the same.
I'm going to let Mr. Hatchett answer that question. Very successful. In case y'all want to know where it is, it's between Dublin and Little Oak Mulgee. The peach stand business is really good down there. No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Unterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before you, I think, 4 bills. The first one is on page 1, Senate Bill 8. And as you know, I have been working with the chairman of the Insurance Committee in the House for several years now on several different bills. And this particular bill, Senate Bill 8, is the culmination of a Senate version of in-network versus out-of-network billing practices. The second part of the bill is about transparency and allowing patients who come to a hospital to know their insurance and what is covered and what is not covered. On the second page is Senate Bill 444. This bill is related to Alzheimer's and related dementia. As you know, we've worked on this subject matter for several years now, and we have had a very good task force that has been meeting. We meet quarterly with the House and the Senate and advocates, and all this bill does is to codify our actions and to set up a state advisory council. And if you look further down the page on Senate Bill 2 is Senate Bill 118. This deals with autism. We have been in negotiations for several years now with the House and the Senate, and this is the culmination. I think it's a very good plan so that children who are parents are involved in a private insurance plan have the ability to have applied behavioral analysis options in their plan up until the age of 20. So this gets us in congruence with the Medicaid and the state health benefit plan so that all children have accessibility with the diagnosis of autism and the option for success. If you look on page 3 is Senate Bill 336. This is a department bill that I have the privilege of carrying from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and Director Vernon Keenan, where we are working with internet crimes against children. This gives the option of not having the sting operations have to go to the internet provider, and the perpetrators have gotten very smart and they erase whatever is on their computer. This gives the option of not serving them a warrant or notice that their computers are going to be looked at, so that we can go after those perpetrators better. With that, Mr. Chairman, I think that's it. I'll be glad to answer any questions about any of the bills.
Wait, I think Mr. Smith wants to do an amendment. Oh, are you here?
Oh, there he is.
Yes, sir. I'd like to, your amendment you have on your desk, it just changed the effective date to January 1st versus July 1st. And I recommend, move to approve.
You've got a motion to approve the amendment. Do I hear a second? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Okay, the amendment's approved. Anything else, Ms. Underman?
No, sir. I just appreciate y'all working with me and look forward to continuing in the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Mr. Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My first two times to come ask for Senate Bill 386, I was first, so I thought I'd try something different and come last. But I am here to ask for Senate Bill 386, the Regional Transit Bill. And Monday when I was before you, Mr. Chairman, I told you I felt very confident that we would pass House Bill 930, Chairman Tanner's Regional Transit Bill, out of committee. We did. We passed it out of committee. It is now in rules. And we are both trying to move these bills so we can get to conference. And I would appreciate your support.
Who takes over rules when Mr. Mullis is not there?
I'm not sure who the vice chairman is. I'm not sure. Jack Hill. Is Senator Hill? Jack Hill?
Okay.
Senator Hill will be taking over. But Senator Mullis, I talked to him last night. He's doing better. He's getting some tests run today, but keep him in your thoughts and prayers.
Well, I kind of want these bills to float out together.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Rakestraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I come to ask for H.R. 913, which is a House Study Committee on pre-arrest diversion programs and diverting people into treatment and creating pathways for mental health and addiction treatment. And the other bill is H.R. 447, which is a bill that declares pornography a public health concern to help us combat the demand side of human trafficking.
No questions.
Thank you.
Any member of Rules got anything they'd like to add to this chaos? That's pretty good. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because that Hardy's still a member of the House and hadn't forgotten everything, I'd like to put my name by Senator Strickland's bills, SB 377 and SB 406.
Ms. Dempsey.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, two urging resolutions, encouraging resolutions actually, H.R. 1364 and 1375.
Mr. A. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name besides Senate Bill 370 and Senate Bill 458, Senator Wilkinson's bills.
Wait a minute. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to also put my name next to 370 and also Senate Bill 118.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the first page, I'd like to ask for House Resolution 1260, wait a minute, House Resolution 1292. It's for us to look, asking the Advisory Council to look at quality long-term care for individuals with Alzheimer's. And I would also like to ask for the next one down, HR 1363. I don't want everybody to faint, but I am asking Congress to move the Hatch bill so that we can finally have studies that do our academic institutions on marijuana to see if it's effective.
Can I question here? I've got a resolution for Alzheimer's related dementia advisory council, and then I've got a bill over here somewhere from Ms. Underman that basically creates the council. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Benton, help me.
That bill by Senator Underman is to bring back language that was accidentally deleted in code this past year. The Guard Council has been meeting, but in a rewrite of some of the code, that section was deleted accidentally, and so we're having to put it back in the same way we put it in before. We can't just can't add it back. So that's what that is.
Okay. Ms. Tankersley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to place my name by Senate Bill 401, that's Senator Tippin's bill, and I think it'll be great for our workforce development and our young folks as they decide what sort of career path they should pursue and achieve some certifications while they're yet still in high school. I'd also like to place my name by Senate Bill 406, the Georgia Long-Term Care Background Check Program, Representative Estration and Senator Strickland.
Mr. Knight. Wait a second. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to place my name beside Senate Bill 82 on page 1 and Senate Bill 349 on page 2.
Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked for Senate Bill 381 dealing with surplus lines insurance. It would just simply allow non-admitted insurers domiciled in this state to be able to sell in this state.
Mr. Peake.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. In order to prove there is harmony in the universe, indeed, I strongly support Madam Chairman Cooper's H.R. 1363. Kumbaya, yes.
Can I say ditto? Okay. That might mean that it's probably going to be on. I'm just saying. And that was a dilly-dilly from several of my other folks up there. Okay. Temporarily, this will be the calendar for tomorrow, Thursday, the 35th day of session. Modified open, H.R. 1260. Have a move to hear second. All in favor? It's on. Modified open, H.R. 1363. Any opposed? Ha ha. It's on. Uh, Modified open, Mr. Blackman's SB 82. All those in favor signify by aye. It's modified open, SB 330. Do I hear a second? All those in favor signify by aye. It's modified open, SB 381. All in favor signify by aye. It's modified open, SB 395. All those in favor signify by aye. It's modified structure, SB 118. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's modified structure, SB 321. All those in favor signify by aye. Are we okay, Earl? That's not the same one. We're gonna hold that other one. Modified structure. SB 406. All those in favor signify by aye. It's SB under modified structure, SB 436. All those in favor signify by aye. It's under structured, SB 328. All those in favor signify by aye. It's that's all. I know, but I want to talk about that part of it.